Good evening. I watched a few videos on the Dublin protest, and I just have a couple of things to say about it. Number one is the Gardaí's continuous involvement in trying to disrupt, manipulate, hinder, and stop or disperse a group that's engaged in a constitutionally protected right, which is the right to peacefully assemble and protest. Okay? So, and that is permitted only at the behest, or only, not even at the behest, but only with the consent of the Irish people. And I believe that Irish people allow themselves a little bit too much to be dictated to and to be manoeuvred away from what they want to be doing, what they have a constitution, what they have a constitutional right to be doing, right? And I think there's a couple of factors at play there. And one is that I think people still believe that they have something to lose. And what I mean by that is that the fear of being arrested, the fear of Gardaí invoking this Public Order Act, and the fear of having your name, your address, and your profession painted across the media and painted across the newspapers, which we've seen happen. There's no Gardaí coming out saying we should withhold the names of these people, right, as they do in other cases. But I think that fear, it's something that's still burdening the Irish people, and it's something that is feeding into the decision making that people have. And this isn't a knock on anybody that's protesting. I absolutely commend you for getting out and exercising this lovely right that life and nature grants you, which is the right to object to something and the right to gather with like-minded people and in chorus object to something, right? Even though the state is trying to put enough pressure on you to the point where you start believing that you don't have a right to do these things. And there's another factor at play, which I think adds into that feeling that people might have, right? The fear of maybe I'm doing something wrong, or maybe I am being too disruptive, or whatever the case is, right? And that is the way that the Gardaí set up at these protests and the way they're organised, right? So we've seen this enough, and we've seen it regularly enough to be able to determine that this is the tactic. This is the strategy going into these protests. And what I'm talking about is how Gardaí set up, where they're looking when they're setting up and when they are forming a perimeter between peoples, right? And the other peoples I'm talking about tend to be these NGO-sponsored people, okay? And half of them, watch the videos yourself and listen to these people, right? So what the Gardaí do is they will stand facing the protesters all the time, every single one of them. And the Gardaí are so comfortable with these anti-protest NGO groups. They are so comfortable, and I would guess they're probably so familiar with them, that they have absolutely no hesitation in holding their backs to these people for long stretches of time, all right? And instead they choose to face the protesters continuously, eyes on them all the time. And the impression that gives is that the protesters are the potential criminals there. They're the ones that need to be watched by these Gardaí. Not the tens or hundreds of people screaming and shouting behind them. They have absolutely no concern with these people, which would make you think either they are very familiar with them, or they've been told that these people are no harm to you. From who? Obviously higher up, chain of command, right? So what is the relationship there, right? I would like to know that. And whatever way it works out, these three entities, right? So you have the government, the Gardaí, and these NGO-sponsored people. They work hand in hand. They work hand in hand because they're all aimed at the same purpose, which is to shout down and to put people off engaging in a perfectly lawful activity. And that's what the Gardaí do. And I'll add the media into that for the quartet, right? Because the media, they're there solely to capture images of people being arrested. And the Gardaí are there to make arrests, regardless of what the legal standing is on, or what the legal standing of these arrests are, right? The outcome in the courts is nearly irrelevant, because it paints the image that you will see and that everyone will see tomorrow of these protests of someone on the ground being arrested. And you'll think, oh, Jesus, sure, it took 4 guards to take him down. He must have been at something dodgy. 99% of the time they're not. I'm yet to see an arrest of someone at these protests where it was warranted. Right? And it'll make you wonder. Another thing as well, actually, while I'm talking about the media, the way they're set up again, right? So you have these barricades, these concrete blocks or cement blocks on the road, blocking the progression of the protesters. So another tactic there to stop protesters in their track from freely travelling across public roads. The grounds of that, I would argue that that's an unconstitutional thing to be doing. And how I would argue that is the fact that you have media members standing on the other side of these barricades with cameras aimed at the protesters. So the media are on the side of the Gardaí, figuratively and literally in this case, with their cameras pointed at the protesters. Now, what would happen if a protester was to step over that barricade? More than likely they would be arrested. On what grounds? And I believe that this is the next step or the next evolution of the situation in Ireland, is when people begin to start testing these legalities and testing the lawfulness of these things, right? Because at the moment, I think the idea of a court date and that, and having your public information splashed all over the tabloids and splashed all over the papers, it's off-putting. It's off-putting because no one wants to be seen as a criminal. No one wants to be seen like they're being totally disruptive and a nuisance to the country and to the people in this country. That's not what people want. People simply want to be listened to. And they want to go to the House of Representatives in this country that are supposed to lend an ear and are supposed to listen to the people. And what do the guards do? They block it off. They stop you from doing that. So I would just say this to end. Now is the time to stand up and be men. Now is the time to stand up and show that you are a good-natured and good-hearted human being if you're a member of the Gardaí. Come out. Come out and say, I did not sign up for this. I signed up to protect people and to uphold the peace, not to discriminate against people who have a lawful right to say what they're saying and a lawful right to proceed to the Dáil if so be. What laws are they invoking where they're determining that they can block off these public streets? To you, but yet have the media on the other side. Right? So, if you are a good person, or if there's a guard in your family, have a word. Is this what you signed up for? To shut people up, to silence people? Is this what you learned in law class? Is this what your legal learning has been? Is that the Constitution be damned? Now, there is a situation in Ireland where the Constitution is suspended, and that is in cases of national emergencies. Are we still operating under them? I know that Simon Harris brought them in during COVID, these more emergency powers. Are we still operating in that time period? If there's guards out there or barristers or whatever the case is, I would like to know that, or a government representative or a government member, whatever. Are we still operating under that? Because if we're not that there's any lawful legitimacy to that anyway, but if we're not, then all of these recordings of the protests, to me, they show the Gardaí breaking their oath. And I cannot wait for the day when any qualified immunity or any defence that these Gardaí have from above is taken away. Because I would imagine there's a vast majority of you that would be looking for jobs, and I'll say this in every video I mention about the guards. There'll be a lot of you out of work and you will never be in any position of power over people again because you're absolute tyrants and weaklings that are just getting a paycheck for doing something that you've been taught is wrong. Your whole job is oriented around doing the right thing, and you're not doing the lawful thing. And as an Irish person, to not uphold the law, it's the most shameful thing that you can do as a human being, and particularly as an Irish person, to not be on the side of justice. So if you think you're on the side of justice and you want to make a bit of a difference, come out of them ranks and say something.